Hey, what's up guys and gals? My name is Rick Nineg. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be talking about the Twilight Zone. More specifically about an episode that's called The Silence, and you're not going to believe the behind the scenes story about this episode that essentially changed the whole story. It essentially changed not only the story, but how the actors had to play their roles, editing, and no one was the wiser. Not even you, big fans of the show, would know this unless I would tell you this information, because we are deep diving into classic TV shows and movies. The best way to support the channel is by liking, commenting, and subscribing, and it's free to do so. But for those of you who want to go a little bit above and beyond that, Patreon is a great way to support the channel. For less than $1 a month, you can be a very substantial supporter for the channel. So many perks, so much fun, exclusive stuff on there. So make sure to check it out. As I mentioned, the episode The Silence is a really interesting one from season 2, and it's a 25th episode of that season. And we have two characters. The first, the protagonist, we have Jamie Tennyson, is played by Liam Sullivan, as well as Francois Tone, I think that's how you say it, is playing the Colonel, or Colonel Taylor. Now, what makes these characters interesting is that they are enemies. They are not friends at all. And there's a really interesting plot because they are both members of a country club. Now, unfortunately, the character Tennyson is constantly talking, and the Colonel Taylor is super upset at this. So what does he do? He bets Tennyson $500,000 that he cannot be completely silent for 1 year while living in a glass enclosure in the club's basement. Now, if you really think about it, I mean, not talking for a year is pretty mind-numbing. Like, it's pretty crazy to think of, but I think even more than that, the fact of him living in a glass enclosure is even more mind-blowing. Now, if you're a fan of this episode, let me know in the comments down below if you love this episode, The Silence. What is crazy, you never thought of, did you ever notice a bathroom in there? I mean, how'd the guy go to the bathroom during that entire year? There's no signs of it, and it really makes you think. I mean, he didn't see his wife for a year as well, and that was part of the tension in the episode. And there were a lot of headaches behind the scene. The first one I'll tell you about is the fact that this enclosure was entirely made of glass. And so that made it super difficult. I mean, when the crew saw the set, they pretty much lost it. They got so upset, saying, how in the world are we going to get light in there? And how are we going to show the light without getting any reflections? So they had Buck Houghton, and he hired another man, George Clemens, and they worked on it, and they figured that the only thing they had to do was take out 2 panes of glass in the whole enclosure, and then they could film through that, and then there would be no reflections. But there was a lot of camera tricks and essentially camera positioning mostly that they had to do in order to avoid these reflections. But on the second day of shooting, there was a big problem. Essentially, the antagonist, the quote-unquote bad guy in this episode, he was played by Francois Tone. Now, they were able to get a first day of shooting going, and this is where the key thing appears, and that is they essentially got him normally playing his part, and he shot everything normally. But on the second day of shooting, the actor Francois didn't even show up, and everyone kind of freaked out. They waited for him several hours, and after 10 a.m., about 4 hours of waiting, they realized that he was in a hospital. He was in a clinic. Now, what's crazy is they don't even know exactly what happened to him, but apparently he had been at a party, and he was attempting, according to the story, to pick a flower for his date off a bush on a terrace. And he unfortunately slipped, fell down the hillside, and landed on the driveway of the house next door. Now, what's crazy about this, I don't know if this is even plausible. This is what the information is, and even people doubt this to this day. They think maybe something else happened, and this was just a cover story because it may have been too embarrassing. But regardless, unfortunately, the actor Francois Tone, the antagonist, he had a problem. Tone got himself into trouble. He approached a girl in the parking lot of a restaurant with her boyfriend who had taken offense and beated him up. I mean, it was a really bad beatdown. In fact, the result was that half of Tone's face was scraped raw. They believe his face was even maybe shoved against the asphalt or concrete. And yeah, it was essentially raw. It was disgusting to look at. So here's the dilemma. This is what Rod Serling had to deal with. You have a man who filmed exactly one full day of shooting, so they had essentially part of the story. And remember, they don't even shoot these episodes chronologically. They shoot scenes here and there. And so some of the scenes had him facially, you could see his whole face. But now they had to finish this episode and had to shoot more scenes, and half of his face was all messed up. So they thought, let's just recast him. But that was out of the question because they used so much of him and his face and his character. So what did Serling do? He said, well, come on, Francois, let's shoot the other side of your face only. Let's essentially film the remaining scenes that we have left for this episode in a profile shot, and we'll hide the fact that you're swollen and essentially raw and disfigured on the other side, which is crazy to think about. I mean, think about this. It changed the whole frame of the story. So so when he's talking to Tennyson and Tennyson is inside that glass and you can see him looking sideways, that is to hide his face. And essentially they were not wanting you to see any of it, but I believe I caught some of it here. Just an interesting little fact here, but it made the scene a little bit odd. In fact, it made it a little crazy. In the opening of the episode, we see Tone's full face, but when the scene changes to the glass cage in which Sullivan is imprisoned, we only see Tone's face in profile, with half of it being obscured. Then in the final scene, we see Tone's face full again, because remember, it was shot out of sequence. That's how most Hollywood shoots his stuff. But it works. It kind of works. It's weird, but it works. It creates a little bit of depth in the episode, and the scenes in the middle in which you see Tone fully, they're trying to convince Sullivan, or the actor of Tennyson, to break character. In fact, you can see what he's doing here. You see Tone speaking out of the corner of his mouth, his face turned only half toward the camera, and the tone makes him seem really sly, sneaky, even kind of like a predator himself, and it adds a little bit of suggestiveness in there and creepiness, and the impact was felt. So watch this episode again and figure out if you can tell that it's a little awkward, but it kind of works for the episode, and the fact that he's hiding this disfigurement essentially on the other side is truly mind-blowing. And remember, they had to alter this scene so it's not head-on and straightforward, it's sideways and just crafty and weird. And notice how he holds his position there. I don't know, I think it's really cool. Maybe rewatch the episode and see if it changes your thoughts on it. It makes it a little more interesting that now you know the secret of what was going on. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks so much for the support, and most importantly, everyone, be hopeful. Thank you to all my supporters, especially my Diamond tier patrons: Russ C, Sally N, Vito L, Citizen Kane 359, David D, Jerry D, Jennifer P, and Kevin K. If you want to join this list and be a patron supporter, it does help out so much, and I thank you ahead of time.